Baker.
It's actually called like, you know, like...
I know the right everywhere. This ladder, a little bit about. Here are the different kinds of fish. They've got pink, triple, sockeye, chop.
Okay, so what we're going to do is I'm going to give you a little bit of information and we're going to go downstairs and see what's in the hatchery and what we're kind of all about. So first of all, I know that some of the main thing that you're looking at is what's kind of happened in the history and due process, that sort of thing. So at one time, there were just tribes here and they were fishing on the strings. What their rights to fish were not going to be taken away. But then later on, Judge Holt decided that fishing in common with what they said.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Hello.
Wow.
I played them all.
To the oldest brick building in Washington State. The first non-native settlers came here in 1852 in the fall. And they were looking for a waterfall next to salt water so they could build a sawmill. And they found it. Off the Wacom Creek, you guys came by it down here, didn't you? Did you come that way? Yes. Along the water. So up at the mouth of the creek, just before it gets flat, where the tide line is, that was where the first sawmill was. It was opened in 1853 and it burned in 1873. So by 1856 and 7, there were about 120 people living along Bellingham Bay. There were two men who were primarily responsible for the settlement here. They were the ones that operated the sawmill. Henry Roeder and Russell Peabody. They were trying to exploit the resources. So the main things here, of course, was the coal and the timber. You have to remember that they couldn't cut anything bigger than a 14-inch log because they didn't have the equipment they do now.
Welcome to the Picket House. This is Washington State's oldest wooden building that hasn't been moved off of its original location. It was built in 1856. George Pickett was a captain in the U.S. Army. When he came out, he was sent out to build Fort Bellingham and build a military road. So Fort Bellingham's by car about 5 minutes up the road this way, but it would have been a really long distance through rough forest and across creeks. Here they come in war canoes and they do battle, and they would take the local native people as slaves, and they were tough. When they did battle with English warships, they often won. So these were pretty scary folks that came down from Canada and northern BC. He married a woman from one of those northern tribes. So his second wife was a northern woman, and they had a son named Jimmy. 4 months after Jimmy was born, his second wife passed away. So we don't actually know what her real name was, but we do know a lot about Jimmy. So let's come on into the house. We'll tell you a little bit about the pitchfork.
You can imagine this thing actually being shot through your home or through your leg. These used to bounce on the battlefields and take people's legs out and kill them. Wow. You know?
That does not sound pleasant.
It's about 40 pounds.
Look how small I am.
And it's small.
Yeah, it's a steel cannonball from the pig war.
Yeah. He was a lot older person than his dad. George was actually
of Ireland. She wrote it here while living in Washington.
yeah.
Her family had quite a bit of land left from Ella Higginson.
This is really cool.
And they needed
Look at this stuff.
Blake, where are you?
This was used by people who
Sorry.
magnifying. They either use for a book or to use for like when women are doing stitching or whatever, it's a magnifying thing. It hasn't had anybody living here since 1936.
Oh man, I did that wrong.
It's been a museum ever since then. And it's only open one afternoon a month.
In here we have some photographs of George Pickett's wife's trunk. This is how we usually.
Jimmy was a lot more interesting person because he was half-breed, and his father sent him out to all the schools. His father never saw him again after the Civil War. But Jimmy was educated in a magnifier for like reading books.
Pose for me.
No, mother, go away. The kitchen was probably built in the early 1900s sometime.
So cool.
An add-on long after Pickett was gone.
The Confederates are getting mauled here.
A bathroom.
These are.
Okay, here's the Picket Bridge they were talking about.
This building is Bellingham's old city hall. Did you know that at one time there were 4 little towns around Bellingham Bay? There was Whatcom down by the creek, where you probably have been by now. You're standing on Seaholm ground, and then way down south was Fairhaven, and between the two, about where Boulevard Park is, was Bellingham, the first Bellingham. This is a Victorian building. And it's called a Victorian building because Victorian architecture was the popular way to build buildings during the reign of Queen Victoria, the Queen of England. So all over the world, this kind of structure was built. Big towers, lots of fancy work. This building was built 122 years ago in 1890. Photographs, 44 of his personal diaries. Donovan started writing diaries when he was 13. And finally, in 1928, they built this big addition, and they had to build a tunnel. They did build a tunnel into an elevator, and above that tunnel entrance, they put a marble statue. J.J. Donovan donated this statue. Railroad Avenue. You know where the farmer's market is? You ever been to the farmer's market? That's called Depot Market Square because it's built right along where that building. Everybody gather around this picture because it's an important picture. Now, that's right away. This is the boardwalk that you walk to the Boulevard Park.
Hello.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. So good to have you out here on such a nice day. Much of the rock that you see as we leave the breakwater came from Lovey Island, which is off in the distance. You can see there's a scar there. Most of that rock came in to create this breakwater. We're going to be heading out, and we'll take an immediate right. Now, on boats, we don't call it right or left. We call it starboard, or we call it port. So to the right is starboard, and to the left is port. Off the bow, the pointy end of the boat is 12 o'clock. Over to the right midships is 3 o'clock. Let's wrap our heads around 3 very important dates. 1492, I think you know that pretty well. Of course, Columbus was making some adventures across the Pacific Ocean and realizing that the Earth wasn't flat anymore. One of those long piers, and it stretches, just about a half mile out. And all along this north end of the bay were these piers to export coal and lumber and so forth. And so this is the last one remaining here in Bellingham Bay. It's very shallow here, Peabody and Roeder. He took advantage of something called a donation claim. As things became crowded down in the what we call now Portland area, or Fort Vancouver, the settlers decided to make their way north. Kind of interesting, though, that about 13,000 years ago, this whole area was covered with ice. Mount Baker was named for the first lieutenant on that first George Vancouver expedition, and it's named for Joseph Baker. Once again, a first lieutenant. Mount Baker sits at about 10,750 feet above sea level. That's where we're at right now. The architect was actually a fellow by the name of Alfred Lee, who came north from Oregon City. He was a wagon maker. When he came to Bellingham, he just decided that he didn't want to be a wagon maker anymore. This is the Whatcom Waterway. It's dredged to a depth of 26 feet, so we can get large vessels into the flora and fauna in free mode right now and doing very well. We're currently leaving the township of Whatcom. Seaholm over here to our starboard side, 9 o'clock position. Uniontown, which originally or later became Bellingham, a small community, and Fairhaven, way down south of town here. They all consolidated in 1984 and were given the common name of Bellingham. So the bay was named Bellingham first, and then the town. Those large piles that you see right there are the remains of a dredging project that took place over in Swallowcombe Bay. This is the remnants of a garbage dump. Back in the 50s and 60s, people didn't have sanitary service to depend on, so they brought their garbage down in bags, dumped it right here. They put in this very, very nice beach here. So Boulevard North is basically just a waste dump of construction material. And they began to fuse together, and the consequence is that big rock. It's actually not a rock at all. It's all made of metal.
Wow.
You can see that kind of rusting there. It gives you kind of an idea. Piano, and the owner wouldn't buy it. The new owner wouldn't buy it, so at the last moment, he wheeled it down Harris Street and dumped it right in the bay, right back there where you see that dock. Around the corner we come now, there's the location of the U.S. Coast Guard. The Terrapin and Sea Lion are here and ready for any event that might happen out of the water. Pump out all the water, it floats up, and then they can get it in here to work on. We're here and wander back across the bay. You can see downtown Bellingham here, all those points of interest that we talked about. Look at the mountain. Sun Valley, that's your backyard. Towers up above. Microwave towers and so forth, radio towers.
You guys, when you're done with your lunch food, you might as well clean up now.
South Hill. In the early days, the fishermen would use these to set their compass because they run directly east and west. From where we're at right now, you get a pretty good vantage point of the townships and in their consolidation in 1904. Now, just directly in front of us at the 12 o'clock position is and was formerly the Columbia Cement Plant. Enjoy some of this sun and warmth. And I'd like to know, who's responsible for dialing up this weather? Nice job. Thank you very much. That's the whale.